essence of this religion alive and present within our life throughout the rest of the year. So within the month of Muharram, we are looking to revive an understanding of Islam, a connection to Islam, and an appreciation of the beauty of Islam, so that when we bid farewell to the days of mourning, that appreciation and that benefit stays with us. And the seed that we plant continues to sprout and grow and benefit us and those around us for the rest of the year and the rest of our life. And that means that our participation in these gatherings must be an active participation and not a passive participation. So it shouldn't be habit that brings us. It shouldn't be a sense of obligation because our parents want us to come, or our family, extended family, is coming to these majalis, and so we feel a sense of obligation as well. It shouldn't be a sense of guilt, that I will feel guilty if I don't come to these commemorations. But it should be a realization that the love of the family of the Prophet is what lies at the heart of Islam itself. And all of the other rituals, obligations, teachings that we have within Islam, they are meant to bring us in line with and in obedience to the wilayah and the guardianship of the Ma'asumeen, the Prophet and his noble progeny. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. That is a very explicit hadith of our fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salatu was-salam, where he says that Islam has 5 principles. Islam has 5 pillars. 4 of them are obligations that you have as a Muslim. Salat, and zakat, and siyam, and hajj, prayer, and zakat or alms, fasting, and the pilgrimage to the house of Allah. And then the 5th one, the Imam says, is al-wilayah. And then the Imam says that out of these 5, the most important is not prayer, not charity or alms, not pilgrimage to the house of Allah, not fasting. وَلَمْ يُنَادَى بِشَيْءٍ كَمَا نُودِيَ بِالْوِلَايَةِ. Nothing is as important and has been emphasized in Islam as much as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has emphasized wilayah and appreciating and accepting the leadership and the guardianship of the Prophet and his family, because it is through that connection that we are able to truly worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and accomplish as individuals and as a society those goals that Allah wants us to accomplish. And if, according to the explicit teachings of our Imams, wilayah is the most emphatic of our Islamic obligations, then those gatherings where we make that connection to wilayah are the most important gatherings of our life. More important than anything else that we might do to get ahead in our studies to get ahead in our careers, to accomplish any other goal that we might have in life, a gathering where we strengthen our attachment to Ahlul Bayt is more important than any other gathering, than any other action that we might be able to do in our lives. That realization, that connection, that attachment is what should bring us to these gatherings. And if we have a family that reminds us to come, then that is a blessing. If we have a sense of obligation, then that is a reinforcement and a blessing. If we have a sense of guilt, if we miss a majlis, then that is a reinforcement and a blessing. That is not the reason why we come. That is a gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. That if my own wisdom and my own willpower falter, then Allah has given me other sources of reinforcement and reminding that bring me to this place. But the goal and the reason for our attendance is because the purpose of our life is to serve Allah. And we cannot serve Allah fully and properly without an attachment to the Prophet and the progeny of the Prophet. And inshallah, during these nights that we are together, that is the question that we are going to explore together. And I will be a student, along with all of us together, in trying to understand and trying to learn better what it means to have a connection to Ahlul Bayt. And through Ahlul Bayt, to achieve virtue and righteousness and salvation according to the teachings of Islam. Our goal will be to ask the question, what is the path of virtue? And how can all of us become travelers on that path? So that in every moment of our life, in every action that we do, we are moving closer to Allah. Not just when we are formally engaged in an act of worship. Not just when we come to the masjid, we say, oh Allah, this is for you. Or when we pray. Or when we are fulfilling one of our acts of worship that is an obligation within Islam. But even when we end that salat, when we end that dhikr, when we end that ritual act of worship, and we come to the rest of our life, and then we are doing those things that we need to do for our own personal and our family obligations. If you go to school, if you go to work, if you go to work out, if you go to relax and entertain yourself, even those decisions should be part of that goal of bringing you close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you are able to understand what the path of virtue and the path of salvation is, then every thought and every word and every deed in your life will be part of that path, bringing you close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I can go one step further and say that if we are not able to understand that path of virtue, and if we are not able to understand how to connect ourselves properly to Ahlul Bayt, then even our ibadah will not be able to bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we might fast, but in the words of our second Imam, Imam Hasan al-Mujtaba alayhi salatu was-salam, there are some people who fast in the month of Ramadan. And what do they get from that fasting? They get fatigue and they get hunger, and they don't get anything else. Because if you're fasting to show off, if you're fasting to impress someone else, if you are not fasting for the sake of Allah, or if you think you are fasting for the sake of Allah, but you don't know what Allah wants you to get out of that fasting, and then you don't have the humility, and you don't have the gratitude to Allah that should come from being able to worship Him, then what you are getting is that you are hungry, and you are tired, but you don't derive spiritual benefit. There are many people who pray. As Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wa salam said, that if you look at the prayer of the Khawarij, and you look at the recitation of Quran of the Khawarij, then you will be embarrassed, because their prayer is more fervent and more frequent than your own prayer. Their recitation of Quran is much more fervent and much more in quantity than you recite the Quran. But don't think that means that they are getting a spiritual benefit from that worship. It makes them arrogant, and it makes them self-centered. And in the example of the Imam, it's like somebody who is aiming an arrow at a target. And your goal is to hit the target. But rather than hitting the target, the Khawarij rip that target and the arrow goes past. That is just as bad as missing the target altogether, or rather it destroys it. It may be more destructive than if you had just missed. Because if you miss, you can shoot again and you can come closer to your target. But if you destroy it, then it is much more difficult to rectify that mistake. So if we recognize Ahlul Bayt and our obligation and our connection to them, then not just our formal worship, but everything that we do in our life will be part of bringing us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we miss that connection, then even our formal worship and ibadah will not be able to bring us closer to that destination. So that is our challenge and our goal during these nights, to recognize what is that path and how are we to understand the relationship that we have to Ahlul Bayt in a way that allows our every moment, our every decision, our every action, our every word that comes from our lips to move us in a direction that is pleasing to Allah, that brings us closer to Allah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And the overarching theme within which I would like to frame that question and that exploration is the path of virtue, or the path of righteousness, or the path of salvation. What is the nature of the path that Islam has defined for us in order to achieve success and salvation? Many people have that question. And sometimes I hear, perhaps, if I were to give the 10 most common questions that I'm asked in Sunday school or in other classes, one of the top 5, not even the top 10, would be, if you are a good person, why is it so important for you to be religious as well? And why isn't it enough to be a good person? And then sometimes people make conclusions based on that question. They say that, why does Islam say that you need to marry a Muslim? Because you might be able to find somebody who is a good person and is compatible with you, and whose values and whose morals and whose personality you admire, but they happen not to be Muslim. Why does Islam say that you are to have a special relationship with Muslims that is above and beyond being fair and being just? Because you should be fair and you should be just with everyone, even your enemies and even a non-Muslim. But why does Islam say that you should go above and beyond that with Muslims? That boils down to the same earlier question, that if you are a good person, why is it important to be religious as well? And why can't that be enough? The answer to that question, and inshallah we will look at that answer in detail over the coming nights. But the essence of the answer is that if you think of religion that comes on top of being a good person, then that is not the religion that Allah has revealed. And that is not the religion that our Prophet taught. And that is not the religion of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam in the first place. That religion is something that might be extraneous or an afterthought, because it is added to your life after you have already decided what your values and what your principles are. The religion that Islam teaches us is not just one box in our lives. And I want to be a good person, meaning I want to be kind and forgiving and polite and keep myself clean and have good hygiene and good grooming and all of those other things that are good. And that's just because I'm a good human being. That's just because I'm a good citizen. That's just because I want to treat other people the way I want to be treated. But then, religion is something that comes after that and says you need to pray, you need to fast, you need to do zakat, you need to do all of those other things. Somebody might say that, well, what is the need of that if you are a good person? Whereas Islam teaches us that what makes you religious and what makes you a good person are one and the same thing. And so if you pray and you fast and you do not have those moral values that represent kindness and humility and caring, you are not religious. You just have one box of religion and are missing another equally or more important part of religion. And similarly, if you have that kindness and humility and attribute of caring for others, but you are missing the worship and the creed or doctrine of Islam, then you have one part of what makes you religious, but you are missing another part. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Just in case that perspective is not sufficiently clear, let me repeat it in perhaps simpler terms. If somebody says, why is it important to be religious in addition to being a good person? Then our answer as a Muslim is that being a good person is what makes you religious. And we don't conceive of a religiosity that is separate from being a good person. But being a good person depends on what our yardstick and our standard is. And this is where a majority of us fall into a very slippery slope. Because I would imagine that if most of us were to measure ourselves in comparison with our family members, in comparison with our community members, in comparison with others. And maybe you are humbler than I am, but the first thought that comes to my mind is I'm a pretty good person. And I know my intentions, and I know my sincerity, and I know that people sometimes praise me, and sometimes that comes to us and it gets to our head. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam says, how many people are fooled by when others praise them? And so when you come to me and say that you are a good person, or I admire you, or you gave a good speech, or you did a good deed, then for most of us, that's how we value things in life. You take two children, and they'll fight over a toy. If it's in my hand, then my playmate will want that toy. And the minute I lose interest, the other child will also lose interest, because their interest is not in the toy. Their interest in the toy is because of what interest is expressed by others. And you might look at that and you might say that that's so childish. That's something that toddlers do. But that's how you and I often live our lives as well. We compete over things. We covet things and desire things because they're popular. And the minute they're no longer popular, the minute that they're no longer fashionable, the minute that they're no longer desirable by others, we also start to see the faults and the uselessness of what until a moment ago we were willing to sacrifice our principles and our money and our time to try to acquire. That's how most of us, we imagine the value of things. You might get a promotion and earn a salary, and you're happy with yourself. And then you find out somebody in the next office doing the exact same thing that you are doing earns 20% more. Are you still happy with your salary? Or do you automatically feel like a grave injustice has been done to you? Is it because you're not going to be able to afford your mortgage? Nothing has changed. What has changed? The relative value of that job, based not on what you are contributing and what you are worth in financial terms only, but based on your expectations. And because that's how we live our lives, from childhood and toddlerhood up until, in many cases, adulthood and old age, when you come and praise me, then I think I'm a pretty good person. And most of us judge ourselves favorably. And so I've had the honor and the challenge of sometimes counseling people in marriage and in individual circumstances within life. I've rarely had somebody come and say that I'm having problems in my marriage because I don't think I'm a good spouse, because I don't think I'm doing enough and pulling my own weight. But often we feel that the other person, and it's not only in marriage, it might be in another relationship with your parents, it might be in a relationship with a sibling, it might be in a relationship with your children. You feel that you are doing what you are called upon, or more than what you are called upon, you are pretty good. And then you want advice on how the other person can improve. For many of us, that is the natural state of affairs. But when I think about it, separate from that narrative that I can create of myself, I know that I can't be that good. Because if I were that good, then I would see the effects of it in my life. But I see that I stand for prayer, and I get distracted. And I don't even get distracted because I'm trying to save somebody's life. I get distracted because I see my phone is blinking. And I wonder who's texting. I see that there is a fragrance of dinner wafting up from the kitchen. And I wonder when it'll be ready. Or some thought comes into my mind, a worldly thought, a pedestrian thought, a meaningless thought. And that distracts me from my salat. And right there, that should burst my bubble. If I think that I'm pretty good, then I would not even notice that worldly thought when I am preparing to stand before my Creator. But that's not how I am. And for many of us, we never stop to think that what is it that is the source and the cause of that disconnect between how I like to see myself, and I give myself some security, and I might even react with other people on the basis that they owe me something. But on the other hand, if I were to contemplate, and if I were to think, I would realize that there is something missing. Because that level of distractedness is not compatible with being as good as I'd like to think that I am. And if we want to summarize the query, if we want to summarize the challenge, it is this. When you ask the question, what is the path of virtue, righteousness, salvation, success? The natural first step is to say, what is success? And for most of us, we are not able to define it in any but material terms. So we can tell our SAT score, or our GRE score, or our resume, or our salary, or our accomplishments, or all of those other things that we tell ourselves are signs of our success. And if we move away from money, and if we move away from power, we might think about how popular we are and how many people praise us, or how many friends we have, or maybe we are a little bit better than that and how many people we helped, or how many people we have sacrificed for. But all of those are, although they are not at the same level, and to conceive of your self-worth on the basis of how many people you have helped is better than to conceive of your self-worth in terms of how much money you earned. In the end, they are both material, and they are both physical standards. They are not spiritual standards. A mother who doesn't know a lot of people, but sacrifices her comfort in order to be able to properly raise her children, might never be praised throughout the world. She might not become famous, she might not become wealthy, she might not become well known. But in the eyes of Allah, her rank may be greater even than that person who says that I am going to touch as many hearts as I can and benefit as many people as I can, because that is a material desire to want to do physical good, when what Allah wants is for us to have a spiritual desire to serve His path and to do a great depth of goodness not a great quantity or a great breadth of goodness. So what is the standard then that we are using? Any other question that you want to ask yourself? You have a material standard that you can give. If you want to reach the top of your field professionally, then you can look at people who are accomplished in your particular career, your hobby, your area of interest. And you can measure, one person took this path towards the top, and they made these mistakes. Another person, they took a different path, and they had these successes. And you can choose your own path by looking at those examples and the effects they had in this world. But the challenge is that success and salvation as a believer is not measured on the basis of any result that comes in this world. In this world, you will only see the effects. You will only see the fruit. You will only see the blessings, but not the true measure of what is successful. That is only visible in the hereafter. And that is why you need to have a connection to those who have the highest rank in the hereafter in order to have a meaningful standard of success in this world. Even when we talk about Ahlul Bayt, even when we talk about Imam Hussein, Syed al-Shuhada, alayhi salatu wa salam, sallu ala Muhammad. Sometimes we say that the name of Imam Hussein is mentioned everywhere in the world, and the name of Yazid is not taken with honor and with dignity by any self-respecting human being. But that is not a measure of Imam Hussein's success. That is just the effect. And we should never confuse the two. You will see beautiful signs of ziyarah in Karbala. Through war and peace, safety and hardship, people will come to Karbala. That is not the proof that Imam Hussein is successful. That is just the evidence. That is just the result. That is just the fruit of the triumph of Imam Hussein. It is so profound that even people who don't have a religious outlook and even people who don't have a spiritual outlook cannot help but be overwhelmed by the beauty and the triumph of the victory of Imam Hussein. But that is not the criteria. The criteria is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that the sacrifice of Imam Hussein is that standard by which Muslims are to judge the promise that Allah has made for the establishment of Islam and the establishment of justice and the establishment of truth throughout the world. So that when the Imam of our time comes and he unfurls his banner that all of us and all of humanity is waiting for, then it will be connected by the Imam to the mission of Imam Hussein in Karbala, and it will be the completion and the culmination of that mission. Allah has honored Imam Hussein and his mission. That is why it is the standard of success and salvation and virtue. Not because of the numerical prevalence of commemoration or mourning or martyrdom of Karbala. So for us, we want to discover that standard. That yes, will show itself in this world, but it is not defined by a material standard. Not a monetary standard, not a popularity standard, not a power standard, not even a seeming religious standard. of how much honor we might acquire among Muslims, how much knowledge we might acquire of Islam, how much influence we might acquire within a Muslim community, but within a framework of service to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and connection to those who are our role models to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Two final points that I would like to make in this majlis, inshaAllah. We are coming to try to understand what is the standard of success in order for us then to embark on that path, to remove all of the clouds that come when we live in this world where even our religion and our religiosity becomes a competition on the superficial aspect of our worship. We measure ourselves against each other based on what we were able to do and what we were able to show, and not how humble and how close we will be able to come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, above all else, when we come to the commemoration of Imam Hussein, we want to raise our horizon, raise our sights and our aspirations in order for our hopes and our aspirations to be in accordance with the hopes and the aspirations of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. That was the first point. When I live my life, I want to want what Imam Hussein wanted. I want to accomplish in my life what Imam Hussein wanted to accomplish in his life. That is how I will be able to measure my life according to a meaningful standard. And related to that point, by raising our expectations, I will lower my own opinion of myself. And so I want to leave these gatherings with a sense of how much distance I have to cover in order to be like Imam Hussein. Because that will be the motivation for me through the rest of the year to want to keep coming back to the masjid, keep coming back to these religious gatherings in order to learn, in order to be present, in order to participate, in order to contribute, because I see that there is far, far more that I need to do than I ever thought I was able to accomplish or I needed to accomplish in my life. And if we can do those two things, then our presence in these gatherings will be fruitful. Raise your horizon above the worldly horizons that we normally live in, and lower your estimation of where you currently are to a place where you feel yourself absolutely vulnerable and therefore in need of God to take you by the hand and lead you and guide you to a better place. And you see that horizon even among those who were pious, constantly in need of development. The brother of our Imam, Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, was a sincere follower of Imam Hussein. He considered him to be his Imam and not just his brother. He was pious, he was learned, but when the Imam told his family that I am preparing to leave Medina, one of the first people who came to the Imam with tears in his eyes was Muhammad ibn Hanafiya. And he said, "Oh my master, oh my brother, I cannot bear to have you leave Medina. Can I ask you to reconsider your decision? I fear that the people of this ummah will call you and then forsake you. And the Imam said to Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, that my brother, I thank you for your sincerity. I honor your tears and your devotion, but know that this is a path that has been decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You look at your Imam and you want your Imam to live and not be martyred. But your Imam is looking and seeing Islam being martyred. And tell me, O Muhammad, should I save my life and let Islam suffer? Or should I suffer and give Islam the strength to be able to thrive until the hour of the day of judgment? Muhammad ibn Hanafiya said that, "O my master, what is your command?" The Imam said that my brother stay in Medina and be my eyes and my ears. The Imam raised the goal, the aspiration of Muhammad ibn Hanafiya. He said, look at it through my eyes, not to save your Imam, to save the life of your brother, but to save the life of Islam. Then the women of the family of the Prophet, they came, and it is said they surrounded Imam Hussein in his home, and they began to weep, and they began to mourn, and the Imam called out, he said to them, that, "O my women folk, O my respected aunts, O my respected elders, I tell you that I am leaving in secret. Don't mourn in a way that my enemy will come to know what my plans are. Don't grieve tonight." And they replied with a single voice, that when the Prophet died, we knew that we had his daughter and we had Amir al-Mu'mineen. A few short weeks later, when we buried Lady Fatima, we had Imam Ali and we had your brother and we had you. And then we lost Amir al-Mu'mineen. And then we lost Imam Hasan. And when you are leaving Medina, we know that we will be losing you as well. Today we feel that the Prophet and Imam Ali and Lady Fatima and Imam Hasan and Imam Hussein are all being martyred in a single night. And you tell us not to mourn. And the Imam says there will be a time for your tears, but tonight is a time for silence. Tonight is a time for prayers. And the Imam took their leave, and he went to the masjid to bid farewell to his grandfather. And it is said in history that when the Imam entered the masjid, his eyes fell first upon the mimbar of the Prophet, and he broke down in tears, remembering the moments that he would spend by the side of his grandfather, the Prophet, when he would lift him in his own arms, and he would give his khutbah to the Muslims, and Imam Hussein would be in the arms of the Prophet. And now he was bidding farewell to the Prophet. Then the Imam steeled himself and strengthened himself, and he came forward, and he saw the mihrab of the Prophet where the Prophet would pray. And the Imam went forward, recited a 2 rak'ah prayer, and again broke down in tears and wept for a long time until he again gathered his strength. And then I don't know if it was crawling or if it was walking or in what way the Imam brought himself the few steps to the grave of the Prophet, and he addressed the Prophet. He said that, "Oh my grandfather, if I were not compelled, then nothing in this world could take me away from your grave. But what can I do that your nation, your ummah, your followers have left me no choice but that either I can live in Medina without honor, or I can leave your shrine and I can go and try to save the honor and the truth of your religion and your mission." And then the Imam, he closed his eyes, and it was not in sleep but in a vision, that he saw the Prophet, and the Prophet said that, "Oh, my son Hussein, come back into my arms like you used to do when you were a child 50 years before." And the Imam went forward in that vision, and he wrapped his arms around the arms of the Prophet. And he said, "Oh, my grandfather, if you've come to me, then I have no use of this world. Take me with you to the hereafter, because I have been separated for so long." And the Prophet said that, "Oh, Hussein, I have come to call you to my presence, but know that I am going to send you back into the world for just a few short moments, because Allah has decreed for you martyrdom. Allah has decreed for you hunger and thirst and wounds and suffering, and then I will bring you back into my arms for all eternity, after which there will be no more suffering. Go, Hussein, and bid farewell to your brother. Bid farewell to your mother." The Imam woke from that vision. He bid farewell to Imam Hasan at his grave. And then he came, not through his sight, but through the sight of his heart, and threw himself upon the grave of his mother. He said that, "Oh, my beloved mother, I bid farewell to you." And it is said that a voice came from the grave and said, "Hussein, do not ever bid farewell to your mother, because wherever you go, I shall be with you, and whatever you suffer, I shall suffer with you." Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ